Chapter 4 of the Bhagavadgita describes how to be a perfect yogi, acting without the pairs of opposites, likes and dislikes, acting without any desires. How do you have the desire for self-realization without acting on the desire? The Bhagavad Gita did not say, "Thou shalt not act upon thy desires." What it said is, "Thou shalt not be attached to the fruits of the results of your actions." I may desire to have apples. In my desire to have apples, I plant apple seeds that hopefully tomorrow will sprout into apple trees and I will have apples. Wonderful. That's what God gave us brains for. I desire apples. How can I have apples? Well, I plant apple seeds. If I take care of the seeds, I'll have a tree. If I take care of the tree, I will have apples. However, if the seed doesn't sprout, if some animal comes and eats it up, if the seed sprouts and I have a tree, but the tree does not give me apples, or gives me apples, but the apples are rotten or sour, or the birds and the worms eat the apples before I get to them, I still don't have apples. And if I was attached to the fruit, literally in this case, the apples, I'm going to be frustrated. That frustration is the impediment to my spiritual growth. So God did not say, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita did not say, "Thou shalt not plant seeds. Thou shalt not water them." No. What he said was, plant the seeds, water them, shine the sun on them. But don't be attached to how long it takes them to give you fruit, to what type of fruit, to how much fruit. If you get your apples, great. If you don't get your apples, no problem. That's the point. And the reason for that is we don't have any control over it. I have control over the seeds I plant. I have no control over what happens after that. I have no way to make that seed sprout. Sure, I can follow all the rules of the right soil and the right water and the right, sun. But I don't know what makes a seed sprout. I don't have the seed sprouting mantra or magic wand. Sprout. There's an intelligence in that seed that makes it sprout. How do you make it happen? Who knows? The most brilliant scientists in the world, knowing everything, cannot create a seed that will sprout. Cannot create a leaf, cannot create a mosquito. They could draw you diagrams of exactly the molecular structure of the hydrogen and the oxygen and the nitrogen and the carbon, how they bind, but they cannot create it. Give them a petri dish, give them all the nitrogen, all the hydrogen, all the oxygen, all the carbon, they still cannot make life. We don't have control over it. All we have control over is our actions. And so what Krishna's teaching is not "thou shalt not act." In fact, he's teaching the exact opposite. You must act. You must act in alignment with your dharma. But you must not be attached to the fruits of that. So when you talk about a desire for self-realization, I go, I meditate. Okay, well, it's good to have a desire for self-realization. It's what makes me meditate instead of go out for cheeseburgers. So I meditate. But now, look what happens. If I'm meditating to meditate in that moment, seed has been planted, I've sat down, I've crossed my legs, I'm chanting my mantra, the lights are off, I've turned off my phone. I'm planting the seed. Then I find my mind wanders. Oh my God, this is ridiculous. I'm a horrible meditator. I'm never going to get self-realization. That guru said if I just chant the mantra, I'll get enlightened. He's stupid. I need a new guru. You see what happens? That's because I was attached to the fruits. It's like when they say, the watched pot will never boil. It's sort of that on a much deeper spiritual level. If I'm attached to what's going to happen from my actions, even if what I'm looking for is as noble and pure and spiritual as enlightenment, if what I've got is a desire for enlightenment, then I've created and I'm living in this constant experience of separation. There's me over here wanting enlightenment, which is over there. And every moment I'm still separate. I'm watching myself. Are you enlightened yet? Are you enlightened yet? Well, it's the very act of this separation that keeps me from being enlightened. It's this very act of living in my judging mind that keeps me from being enlightened. And so what I have to do is plant the seed. I sit, I meditate. And I have faith. All my job is to do that meditation. Plant that seed, water it, with the full faith that God knows what He's doing, just like He knows how to make that seed sprout, which I really have no idea how to do. It's all right, God knows. The seed has an intelligence in itself. My soul has an intelligence in and of itself. There's a knowing, an awareness. This is what consciousness is. Consciousness is conscious. Doesn't need me to figure it out. Doesn't need me to be judging it or rating it on a scale of 1 to 10. That just keeps me separate from my consciousness. Then there's me and my consciousness. So I'm never going to be enlightened. Enlightenment is the merging. Yoga means union. As long as I'm separate from my meditation, from my enlightenment, from my consciousness, I'll never experience it. I have to be there. I have to be with it in order to be there. You can't be the watcher of your own enlightenment. At some point, it's like you can't merge into real love if you're watching it. You merge into that state. That's the oneness. That's the real union. And yes, I would be remiss if I don't mention that at the absolute highest level, yes, you can be conscious of your own enlightenment. But it comes not from the mind. It comes from a place of such consciousness, such full awakening, that it's actually easier for us not even to think about that because we confuse our mind with that place. And so for the moment, it's actually easier and simpler to operate simply thinking about merging into the enlightenment, merging into the soul, becoming one with that, one with our consciousness. And let the rest just happen later. It is our overly thinking mind that keeps us from experiencing. the more we think about something, the farther we are from it. You know, it's like as your eyesight starts to go and you have to hold things a little bit farther to be able to see them, right? In order to be able to read it. A friend told me, you know, you need reading glasses when your arms are too short. So in order to be able to see it, we have to just hold it, you know, a little farther and farther and farther. Well, that's all right if what we're doing is reading a book, or a letter, or a note, or a menu, or whatever it is we're reading, a newspaper. But if what we're doing is connecting with our soul, our consciousness, you don't want to hold it at an arm's length. You don't want to be thinking about it. The more I think about it, the farther I'm holding it away. Let me just examine that a little better. If it could just go back a little further. The very act of thinking so much about it is keeping it farther away. Don't try to name it. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to figure out how you're going to weave it into your book. That's the problem. How am I going to tell this to people? How am I going to explain it? Don't worry about that. Just let it happen. It's much more important. Because when it happens, then you really have something to share with the world. If you try to name it as you go along, you miss it. Because as it's happening, it's not semantic. You cannot name it as it's happening. I mean, can you imagine falling into the arms of your loved one and saying, is that your bicep or your tricep that's squeezing me so tightly? Right? I mean, even if you happen to be a doctor, even if you happen to be an anatomy specialist, right? I mean, you'd be missing something in the moment, right? If you were trying to figure out, God, is that her trapezius muscle or is that her bicep? Or, you know, what? Something is squeezing me. Let me figure out exactly what that is. Doesn't matter. What's happening is you're being hugged, you're being held. Whether it's the, bicep or the tricep or the trapezius muscle, who cares? You'll figure that all out later. You'll look at a diagram later on, you'll figure it out. At the moment, just be there. Otherwise you miss it.